Welcome back to The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here today on behalf of Forge College. Now, in our previous lesson, we tackled managing versions, but today we're wading right into the chaotic, fascinating world of blockchain traffic jams. I mean, have you ever been stuck in line behind someone at a coffee shop who just cannot figure out their wallet and they're holding up literally everyone behind them? Well, Ethereum actually has a very specific, structural way of dealing with that exact problem. It's what we're diving into today: sequencing, nonces, and preparing for the comparative capstone. Let's get right into it.
Okay, so here is our agenda for this explainer. First up, recap and the nonce. Then, turnstiles and conductors, followed by phases of a transaction. Fourth, we'll be tracing transaction drama. And finally, we'll wrap with your capstone synthesis workflow.
Section 1. Recap and the nonce, the bouncer at the door. So, we all absolutely despise impatient line cutters, right? Imagine you're in this massive transaction queue and someone tries to just shove their way to the front. To prevent this kind of chaos, Ethereum uses a formal mechanism called a nonce. Technically, it's a per-account, monotonically increasing counter that enforces strict linear transaction ordering. But let's translate that engineer speak, okay? The nonce is basically the ultimate uncompromising bouncer at a club door. This bouncer checks your ticket number and makes sure you only get in if your number perfectly matches the account's next sequence. If the network expects your account to submit ticket number 5 and you show up waving ticket 7, the bouncer tells you to go wait in the pending pool until 5 and 6 show up. And what if you show up with ticket 4? You're a replay. Get out of here. It creates a strict, uncompromising linear order for your account.
Moving right along to Section 2. Turnstiles and conductors, a tale of two layers. To really demystify how Ethereum handles two entirely different layers of transaction ordering at the exact same time, we need to compare the turnstile with the conductor. The turnstile is your local per-account ordering. This is enforced entirely by those nonces we just talked about. It guarantees transactions from your specific account go in exact sequence. But then we have the conductor. This is the global ordering handled by the network's block proposers. The conductor? They do not care about the strict order of your personal life. They just sweep up massive groups of valid tickets from everyone's turnstiles and decide which accounts get processed together in a given block. You really have to keep both of these layers in mind to understand the final state of the network.
And you know, this brilliantly illustrates a super common point of confusion: internal calls. When a smart contract calls another smart contract, does it need a nonce? Well, think of internal calls like people who are already inside a movie theater, happily passing a bucket of popcorn down the aisle. Do they need to go back outside and buy a whole new ticket just to hand over the popcorn? Of course not. They're already past the turnstile. In Ethereum, internal calls can mutate memory all over the place during execution, but they do not carry independent nonces. Their ordering depends entirely on the external transaction that originally got them in the door.
Which brings us to Section 3. Phases of a transaction. The journey of a ticket. Now that we actually have our ticket at the turnstile, let's track its chronological journey as it moves from simply waiting in line to being permanently etched into the blockchain ledger. This journey has 3 distinct phases. Phase 1 is pending. You're in the mempool. Maybe you submitted ticket 6, but the turnstile is stuck on 5. You just kind of have to sit there and wait for the correct nonce. Phase 2 is execution. The conductor has finally picked you up, placed you in a block, and your transaction is actively mutating memory. And finally, phase 3 is finalization. This is where your state change becomes completely persistent. Now, why does this timeline actually matter for you? Because the nonce dictates exactly when your transaction is allowed to graduate from phase 1 and enter phase 2.
All right, Section 4. Tracing transaction drama. T1, T2, and T3 walk into a bar.
Let's set up a concrete case study to see what happens when the line moves smoothly. Here is our absolutely ideal perfect world scenario. Step 1. Transaction 1, or T1, holding nonce 8, updates a smart contract ledger. It executes beautifully. Step 2. T2, holding nonce 9, comes right after, and it successfully depends on the update T1 just made. Flawless. Step 3. T3, with nonce 10, is just doing its own thing, maybe transferring some ETH. It patiently waits its turn in the pending pool until nonces 8 and 9 are fully consumed. Everything is working exactly as the turnstile intended.
But what if T1 brings the drama? This introduces a concept known as head-of-line blocking. Imagine T1 gets to the front of the line with nonce 8, reaches the cashier, and realizes, oh no, they forgot their wallet. The transaction fails or reverts during execution. What happens to T2 and T3? They are completely stuck in the pending pool. They're holding perfectly valid tickets, numbers 9 and 10, but the turnstile categorically refuses to advance until T1's failure is finalized and the nonce increments, or until you just go in and replace T1. It's a total traffic jam, and it's actually often caused because a wallet submitted multiple transactions concurrently without coordinating the outcomes.
Last up, Section 5, Capstone Synthesis Workflow, your playbook for the capstone.
So we've covered a lot of the mechanical theory, but let's shift gears to application. I have to ask the obvious question here. Why does all of this actually matter for your capstone? When you're comparing two different smart contract interactions that resulted in totally different persistent outcomes, how are you going to explain why? You can't just guess. You need a structured way to separate the rigid rules of the nonce turnstile from the unpredictable variability of the network conductor.
And that is exactly what this checklist provides. When you observe a surprising account state, you must ask yourself these 4 things. What was the exact ticket number when the event happened? Were any tickets missing or skipped, creating a gap? Which conductor block actually advanced the ticket? And were your submissions serial with carefully managed nonces, or were they concurrent, causing accidental collisions? If you can answer these, you'll know exactly why your transaction behaved the way it did.
To execute this, you're going to use a synthesis template matrix. I highly recommend taking notes on this framework right now for your capstone. This is exactly how you document your findings. You log your observation, you cite your evidence, and you explain why sequencing matters. For example, if you observe T1 failed, your evidence is the revert receipt in block N, and the sequencing impact is that it blocked nonce N+1. Or if you see a nonce gap in the pending pool, the effect is that head-of-line blocking we were just laughing about. This matrix forces you to make solid, evidence-based explanations rather than just taking a wild guess.
To wrap up all these mental models, I want to leave you with a punchy quote to really lock it into your memory. Nonces enforce the turnstile, but the network conducts the train. If you can just remember that single phrase, you will always be able to perfectly separate the deterministic, local per account ordering from the wildly variable, global block ordering.
And with that, get ready for the Comparative Capstone. Be sure to bring your filled-out synthesis notes to our next lesson. But before you go, I want you to ponder this. If the network conducts the train, what happens to your perfectly ordered turnstile tickets when a massive network event, like a highly anticipated NFT drop, causes the conductor's train to derail entirely? We'll leave that for you to think about. On behalf of Forge College, I want to sincerely thank you for joining me today. For more incredible deep dives into Web3 topics, be sure to visit forge.college as your go-to educational resource. I've been your host, and I will see you next time on The Explainer.